Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, Wisdom Worth Spreading. Wishing you a pleasant listening experience. Today, I will be decoding Choosing Not to Choose. This book suggests that by opting not to choose, life can become better. By adhering to default rules, we can save the cost of making autonomous decisions and invest more time in what truly matters to us. We understand that choices are everywhere in life, whether it's choosing which stocks to invest in, what type of insurance to buy, which book to read, or even selecting a song to listen to. On the other hand, insurance companies have to consider what choices to offer to users, and programmers must design the user experience. Whether in business or everyday life, choices are essential. While more options can enrich our lives, they can also bring complexity. This book, a classic on the subject of choice, draws from economics, philosophy, behavioral science, and provides practical examples to guide us on how to design choices and unveil the secrets behind decision-making. The author of this book is Cass R. Sunstein, a prominent figure in the fields of behavioral economics, public policy, and law, having served as a key advisor during the presidency of Barack Obama. Now that you have an overview of the book and its author, let's delve into its content. The book primarily focuses on three key areas: default choices, when to use nudges, and considering the cost of choices. Through these, it introduces the principles of choice and their practical application. First, let's explore the influence of default choices and the principles behind them. Regardless of the options and services provided, businesses aim to steer user choices towards their desired outcomes, whether it's increased consumption or more eco-friendly behavior. The key to achieving this is through default choices, which don't require users to identify and make selections, but instead guide actions along preset defaults. Default choices are powerful because they create dependency. Rejecting default options requires active decision-making, which can be time-consuming and mentally taxing. Default choices also imply authority and expertise, making users more likely to trust them. This effect is more pronounced among those who lack confidence or knowledge about the options. Additionally, choice overload can lead to decision fatigue, especially for individuals who face numerous daily choices. Those in poverty, for instance, may experience decision fatigue due to having to make many decisions related to basic needs. In such cases, a recommendation from an authority figure can be highly persuasive. In essence, relying on default choices is a natural response when people seek simplicity and are burdened by too many decisions. The influence of default choices is significant, and one reason for this is the aversion to losses. What is loss aversion? Let's illustrate with an example. If you were given $100 for free, you might experience a happiness index of 10 points. However, if you lost $100 due to unexpected circumstances, your happiness index wouldn't just decrease by 10 points, it would be even more significant. People tend to feel greater displeasure from losses compared to the pleasure they derive from gains. Default choices make people feel as if they already have the benefits associated with the default option. Once you reject the default choice, you lose those benefits. For instance, when purchasing light bulbs, if the supplier defaults to offering more expensive energy-saving bulbs, users tend to feel that energy saving is a given. If, at that point, they're told the energy-saving bulbs are out of stock and asked if they can accept cheaper regular bulbs, users will be especially concerned about saving energy. Users prefer energy-saving bulbs, even though regular bulbs are cheaper. Conversely, when the supplier defaults to recommending regular bulbs, users will perceive the energy-saving bulbs as too expensive, even though they save on electricity costs during use. The emphasis on either energy savings during use or cost savings during purchase largely depends on what the supplier defaults to recommending. Hence, it's not necessarily that users genuinely favor or prioritize specific options, it's often due to the influence of external defaults. This innate human trait, loss aversion, ensures the effectiveness of default choices. We've covered the impact of default choices and how they can lead to dependency and aversion to potential losses. Now, let's move on to the second key point: arbitrary choices. Despite the advantages of default options, they aren't a one-size-fits-all solution. Remember the taxi tipping example we discussed earlier? When the default tip value is set very high, people are inclined to abandon tipping altogether. This is because people will actively reject default options when they significantly misalign with their preferences. Default choices can influence user behavior, but they can't directly control it. There are situations where it's not appropriate to provide default choices. For instance, in cases involving cultural and religious customs, such as organ donation, some individuals may find it hard to accept. In these scenarios, governments cannot default everyone into organ donation. It's a matter of personal responsibility, and offering defaults isn't suitable. Medical decisions are another area where defaults are less effective. In the medical field, there are cases where choosing a more aggressive treatment may result in a potential cure but also carries a higher risk of failure and fatality. Conversely, a conservative treatment may not lead to a complete recovery but is much safer. In such situations, doctors typically avoid providing a recommendation with a clear bias. Legal considerations also come into play. In the United States, some women choose to change their last name after marriage. Although it might seem convenient and celebratory, it's not the default choice. Because a mandatory name change could be seen as gender discrimination and a violation of legal rights. In summary, setting defaults is not always feasible, and it's essential to consider cultural, religious, ethical, legal, and personal responsibility factors. While defaults can influence behavior, there are situations where they are impractical or even unethical. Let's move on to the third key point, considering the cost of making choices. Remember decision fatigue that we discussed earlier? Making too many active choices can burden decision-makers, consuming a lot of cognitive resources. If you don't want to invest time and energy in some decisions, you can accept default options or use agents to simplify your life and free up attention for more important matters. Today, various agents in the market can help you manage many aspects of your life, even though they might cost a bit more. If you consider the time and energy you save as more precious, allowing you to excel in other areas, it's often worthwhile. For instance, when it comes to home renovation, actively designing and choosing materials may save money but be quite laborious. Opting for a building company's default choices can free up time for rest or work. Additionally, when making choices, you should consider the cost of errors, meaning that if your choice leads to undesirable outcomes, you'll bear a certain cost for that mistake. Sometimes, those making design choices might understand your situation, but their primary motivation is profit, not necessarily aligning the options with your actual needs. For instance, an insurance company might recommend financial insurance, which you might need, but this type of insurance might not suit your circumstances. The insurance company's aim may solely be to have you pay more, potentially reducing your wealth. Some of these error costs can be negligible, such as overpaying for an online purchase. However, the time wasted may not be worth the minor savings. It's not about saying don't save money, but it's about not wasting a lot of time for minimal savings. Apart from the time and energy expended on active choices and the costs incurred from making errors, there are also hidden costs associated with default choices. One significant drawback is that certain choices may reduce your learning opportunities. This is perhaps the most substantial downside of default choices. For example, when using a navigation system for directions, the system provides a default route that most people tend to follow. Yet, overly relying on navigation can weaken people's ability to make road choices. Some people become entirely incapable of navigating without a GPS. Frequent use of agents or other advanced technological means can lead to the degradation of specific skills, which, if lacking, could hinder your growth. Investment skills are one example. If you only follow expert advice in the field of investment, your investment skills may never develop. And investing is a choice with substantial implications. It's rare to have a clear default option, and even if you're provided one, you might question its reliability. Similarly, due to the rise of the internet, people find online communication more convenient, but it reduces their face-to-face communication abilities. Some individuals who excessively rely on online communication might struggle with in-person interactions. However, if you can accept some skill degradation in one area in exchange for more time and energy to learn in another, then the decline in less important skills might not be a significant concern. For instance, our hunting skills are essentially non-existent now, and most people have no issue with that because the loss of hunting skills doesn't impact their daily lives. But defaults can also narrow your perspective. For example, if you use a music app's recommendation feature, it may only offer music styles based on your past preferences. You might end up listening to a fixed genre of music and not venture into other musical styles. This might seem unimportant, but it matters. Do you recall the aesthetic pursuit of graphical interfaces in Steve Jobs' computer designs, which stemmed from his reflections during a typography class he audited in college? These seemingly irrelevant bits of knowledge can make products stand out. Only by breaking free from the constraints of default choices can you gain more options and, in turn, foster greater innovation. Conversely, by adopting default choices, you confine yourself to your past experiences or the predefined realm of those designing choices. You reject the possibility of a more multidimensional ability and perspective. When you realize that some essential skills may remain undeveloped due to default choices and that this limits your personal growth and opportunities, you'll need to create additional opportunities for learning. If necessary, you can break out of the confines set by those designing choices and explore new horizons. In summary, the third key point is to consider the costs of making choices. These costs encompass the time and effort invested in decisions, the price paid for erroneous outcomes, and the reduction of learning opportunities. Alright, that covers most of today's content. To recap, we first introduced the influence of default choices and the principles behind them. Default choices can influence people's behavior to some extent, and resistance to default options requires a degree of attention and active effort, making it cumbersome. As a result, people often rely on default choices. Even if people aren't daunted by the effort, decision fatigue can make them unwilling to make active choices. Besides the dependence on default choices, the illusion of loss aversion also tends to lead people toward defaults. In the second point, we discussed arbitrary choices. For businesses, there are instances where user preferences can't be effectively described. In such cases, businesses provide consumers with arbitrary choices. When faced with cultural and religious customs that disallow significant interests, when dividing responsibilities, or when legal regulations prohibit default choices, arbitrary choices are used. Lastly, we discussed the costs to consider when making choices. When dealing with countless decisions daily, you need to evaluate whether the time and effort invested in making active choices is worth it. If you believe it's a waste of time and effort, you can accept default options or employ agents to assist you. Furthermore, you must account for the consequences of your choices, which may not suit you. Lastly, it's crucial to weigh whether default choices inhibit your personal growth and development. Opening your mind to more possibilities allows for greater innovation. Conversely, embracing default choices can constrain you within a predefined framework. With that, we've covered today's content. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker Channel audiobook channel, like and share it with your family and friends. Wisdom is worth spreading, so let's open the door to a better future. Thank you, and goodbye.